I'm going to start a fight about automotive parts. By now, we all know that Chinese parts are a problem. Aftermarket parts, performance parts especially, are absolutely riddled with crappy product. Chinese knockoffs of good quality product, things that are built who knows where by who knows who, under what kind of conditions, with what kind of quality control. They put it in a pretty box, they put it online, and somebody's going to buy it, right? Well, I got to be honest with you. The question really is, why is it such a problem? And I think it's our fault. I don't really think it's China's fault. I think it's our fault. I think it's the buyer's fault. I think it's the builder's fault. I think it's us. I think that's what's going on here. Now, if you're already angry with me, I apologize. But I've been around the block a time or two. I've done a thing or two. I've built a thing or two. I've raced a thing or two. Pardon me while I put on my old man hat and I school you about how things used to be. So, I came up in the car world back in the 90s, early 2000s, and I used to drag race my father's GMC Cyclone on the streets of Greensboro, North Carolina, back in the mid to late 90s. I do love that hat, but we don't need to have that for this video. And it was a beast. It was a monster. That thing, 0 to 60, was fantastic. Stoplight to stoplight was incredible. Unbeatable. You just couldn't fight it. And that was the 90s. And then in the late 90s, I ended up with a Mustang GT, which was a great car. Wasn't the fastest thing in the world, but it made pretty good power. Did a lot of modifications to it. Was a great vehicle. I love it. I'd still love to have it this day if it hadn't been stolen from me. But in the late 90s, things really started to change. And specifically, the culture changed. We went away from a lot of the stuff that we were used to in the 90s, in the 80s. And we also still had a lot of the 70s stuff, the old school muscle car guys, the 60s stuff. But that was kind of kept to just the drag race guys and the old guys, to be honest. When we got into the early 2000s and this movie called Fast and Furious came out, it really breathed an incredible breath of life into the aftermarket parts world, into the tuner world, into cars that weren't big bad V8 that gets 8 miles to the gallon in it with a gigantic blower sticking out of the hood, with camshafts that barely made the car idle. They were these things. They were small, little turbocharged vehicles, usually from Japan, sometimes from the US, that created their power based on boost. And at this point in time, we were of the old school mindset of quality parts, good quality parts. We bought Stillen, we bought Apexi, we bought Holley, we bought MSD, we bought everything. All of the things that had good name brands on them that we knew, we trusted, that came with a sticker. We were proud to buy those parts. We spent big money on those parts. I don't even want to talk about on camera how much money I have spent on that twin turbo Dodge Stealth sitting there. This is my car that I used to race and street race back in the early 2000s through the mid 2000s. It was really fast. For a street car, it was really fast. It makes 400 wheel horsepower on pump gas, and it runs well. And that was awesome for that period of time. If you don't believe me that we were interested in really good parts, in the pride in buying the really good stuff, look at the phrasing that we had from that time. Look at the car designs we had at that time. Overnight parts from Japan. There's a reason we talked about that stuff, because they were precision machined. They were quality parts. They were guaranteed parts that you knew that you needed to have in order to go fast. We put our stickers from whoever it is, the manufacturers that we had, down the fenders. Go back and look at those movies. Go back and remember those old times when we used to have our stickers down the side of our fenders. We used to proudly fly the flags of all the pieces and parts that we had in our cars, because it meant we put pride in our product. We put pride in our build, and we spent an obscene amount of money most of the time to be able to build those cars. And they were great. They were fast. They were fun. They were a little furious. But That's what it was all about. After that period, which I would, at least in my generation, call the golden times, after that period, things changed. And I'm going to go back and get my old man hat. Because when I was a kid, and when I was young, we had pride in what we built. And we spent a bunch of money on them. Well, in the mid-2000s, as this stuff was rocking and rolling, and we were spending boatloads of money on our imports, and American V8s were making, 350 horsepower or so, 400 maybe. You had yourself something like a Z06 or something along those lines. But something, specifically two somethings, were about to really, really change everything. One of which was tuning, and one of which was E85. Now, tuning, I want to go into because these cars technically could be tuned. This has got a Mopar Stage 2 computer in it. This car has an air fuel controller. It's still got it in the glove box, or in the armrest, the Apexi AFC. What you would do is you would tune the car by basically tricking it to overfuel at certain times, and you could adjust a little bit of things as far as timing goes, but generally speaking, all you were trying to do was strap a bigger turbo to it and give it enough fuel that it didn't blow the motor up. That was essentially the end of what we could do for tuning-wise. As you get into that world where things started to change, you get into like the Honda type stuff, and you get into aftermarket tuning solutions, things really started opening up. That's when we see things like variable valve timing becoming amazingly powerful. We see things like the much, much larger turbos being able to be tuned around instead of just being an absolute nightmare. And things started to really, really change. And it also was the genesis of when we see things like the LS becoming a major, major player. When the LS was new, when it was an LS1, it was cool. It was nice. It was good. It made power. It was cool. It was a, obvious, great move from the small block Chevy. But it wasn't a killer. It wasn't. But when we realized we could stick two turbos on it, that changed the game. Because now you're able to make real big power. Power to be able to compete with something that makes 400 wheel, all-wheel drive. Or something that made like a 2J. Or something along those lines that came with factory boost, that came with that kind of stuff. When you get into the point where you can tune and control and not blow up an LS with turbos on it, it really changed the game. Then you get into things like E85, which is essentially, at least in my world, in my old man mindset, poor man's race gas. Race gas is expensive. 110, 116, even 100 octane. Those fuels that they used to have back in the muscle car era, back with, my old stuff, they had really, really serious race gas available. Leaded fuels. They could run all kinds of compression. Those guys back in those days ran, 11.5 to 1 compression on gas that they could get easily, and it was cheap. Well, when race gas is $10 a gallon, it's a lot worse. And when you have cars like these that have wideband O2 sensors in them, and you run leaded race gas, it eats those sensors up. It beats things up. So race gas became extremely unattractive. But E85 can give you most of the power of race gas for a fraction of the price. And as race E85 became more available, it became the racing fuel of choice for a whole lot of people. I remember when that transition came, and this car is still on a 93 octane setup. I never did switch this car to E85, but I was quite a mean man on the streets back in these days. This was a fantastic vehicle, and I absolutely loved it. But I got my butt handed to me by a young gentleman in an SRT4 Neon on E85 tune and a gigantic turbo. A little tiny Dodge Neon with a gigantic turbo on it. Not a lot of power, or not a lot of money, just a whole lot of boost, and it made it. And it handed me my butt. And that was kind of the beginning for me of when things really, really started to change. And it was in that era that I think we started to change. I think we got to the point where, yes, those cool, awesome builds were great. But things started to change where we wanted to be able to go fast, but we had other options. Instead of building and buying something like, you know, a Z06 Corvette and putting turbos on it, or a twin turbo something or other from Japan, we now had the ability to buy a junkyard LS, because Chevy put those things in everything. Vans, trucks, vans and trucks. When you get into the point where the 4.8s and the 5.3s and the 6 liters, they come in trucks, become readily available because they literally made millions of them. And we all started to realize all you needed to do is throw some boost through them and put a ability to tune it on there. You no longer had to spend big money to be able to do it. And our culture seemed to change a lot at that point in time, where it wasn't really about what was in it, it was how fast you went. And I will qualify that slightly with the rise of Street Outlaws. That show took automotive by storm. It motivated a whole bunch of people to get into racing. The street racing channel guys literally were motivated to do what they do now because of that show. Not kidding you. And I'm glad it happened. I watched a ton of it myself. I loved it. Chief, I loved him. He's a great dude. Sean's a great dude. They're great guys. I'm glad they did what they did. They were a major force in what changed this industry, because everybody saw these guys going out and being able to compete at an incredible level in their piece of crap cars, right? They were out there running incredible speeds. Now, some of them did it with big blocks, some of them did it with nitrous, some of them did it with turbos, some of them did it with pro chargers. And as the series morphed and it changed, we went from, and you can see this in those early episodes, from cars that were truly street cars, or at least close to street cars, that made somewhat normal power levels, into what we have now. And over that transition, we have seen the rise of tuning that has allowed that to happen. We've also seen the rise of E85 to be able to allow other people to be able to do that. Now, most of those guys probably now run methanol because they're full-blown race cars at this point in time. But E85 allowed a lot of that stuff. You can run a lot of the exact same compressions that you can run on race gas on E85. It's just a thing. So we had this major change in that period of time. And it motivated a lot of people that, hey, I want to go fast. Hey, I want to do it. Well, the problem was, it's expensive to go fast. It's expensive to build race cars. And that kept a lot of people out. But there was a lot of need for it. And as there's a need for something, there's a lot of demand. There's not a lot of affordable supply. Something will happen. In economics, that's pretty simple. So what happens is, you end up with companies that start replicating good quality product. You end up with companies that will knock off the good stuff. The stuff from MSD, or from Holley, or from Garrett, or from take your poison. Those things go over to China. They get copied, essentially, so that they don't have any R&D costs involved in these. All they're doing is just replicating the castings, and they're reproducing them and putting them in a package and shipping them back to the United States. They're finding a company here that'll sell their product, and bang, you're done, right? And as we get to the point where we just want to go fast, we just want to build a race car, it no longer becomes important for us to have those stickers on the side of the car. It no longer becomes important for us to be able to run all the best stuff, the best wheels, the best turbos. It's not important anymore. We just want to go fast. And we know we only have a certain amount of money. So I'm going to buy that cheap Chinese turbo. The Chinese choo-choo is going to get me where I need to be. I need to go buy a junkyard 5.3. Is it the best thing out there? No, but I can afford it. It's cheap. And that's kind of what began that slippery slope, at least in my old man mind. We got to that point where we no longer cared about quality. We just wanted to go fast, and if it was cheap, and if it cut somebody's throat to be able to get there, it is what it is. Now, if you look over that time period also, things progressed insanely fast over that decade and a half, to the point where now the stuff people can do on the street, it would be unheard of in the early 2000s. This car was a monster. Believe me, was a monster in 04. I wouldn't even get invited to come play anymore. You have minivans and SUVs that will easily outrun this thing right now. We've moved so far and so fast. We've pushed the grudge racing and street racing and no prep world, small tire world so far, so fast, because of the rise of LS, the rise of cheap Chinese parts, and tuning. And it's those things, I think, we need to realize the fact that the reason we have these parts, the reason they're everywhere, is because we bought them. We bought them. Well, I didn't buy them. Maybe you bought them. I don't have any of that stuff. I never bought any cheap Chinese crap. I never went through that LS period. I didn't never do that. At the point when I spent, I don't want to talk about how much money on this car, and I got run away from, I kind of got out of that world for a couple of different reasons. But you end up in a rat race of trying to go faster and faster and faster and faster. And yes, I understand whose shirt I'm wearing. And it's fed a lot of this industry. And unfortunately, as we pushed, and I don't want to get into the politics of this, guys, but as more and more manufacturing and production left the United States and went overseas, as more and more of us wanted to go fast and didn't care where our products came from, we just wanted to go fast. We wanted to go fast as cheap as possible. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. It's going to get built by the cheapest people out there in the cheapest way possible. And that's what you're going to get. And anybody who's trying to build a good quality product here in the US, they're going to go out of business because nobody wants to buy it. Or at least most people don't want to buy it. Some people do. Most people don't. Most people just want to save as much money as they can so they can go racing. And I get that. I understand it. But it's completely unfair to say, oh, well, it's China's fault. Well, you know what? It's our fault, guys. I hate to tell you this, but it's our fault. China took advantage of us? Absolutely. But that's business. If there's a hole in the market and there's a demand that's there and there's nobody supplying it, somebody's going to step up. Especially somebody who has no trade controls, no copyright infringement laws, no kind of protection whatsoever for R&D and intellectual property. That's what's going to happen. And it did. And that's why we are where we are. That's all there is to it. Now, I could be wrong. You may be able to say, Austin, you're just an old guy. You don't know what you're talking about. Possibly. I'm willing to have the conversation about it. But I think that's the most logical way you could look at this. And I'm going to stick to my guns on it. So, hope that was exactly what you were looking for today. You know, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I don't. I am hoping this whole situation with Broader Performance and Speedmaster, I'm hoping that this becomes a wake-up call to a lot of people in the industry and to a lot of us racers and people who build cars about how truly bad this is. Broader is not the only person that's been ripped off by these companies. They're the intellectual property rights situation where people build a great product. That guy built and designed and made a great product. And then it went overseas, was copied, knocked off, and then reproduced by somebody else and sold under a different name. That happens all the time. I don't even want to think about how many American businesses have struggled and suffered and lost sales, maybe got out of business entirely because their hard-earned design work was stolen and reproduced at a cheaper rate by somebody who didn't give a shit. But the only reason that's possible is because we stopped caring. We stopped buying. We stopped buying the good stuff. We just wanted to go cheap and fast. And if you look at the race car world now, you can see that change, especially in drag racing. It's cheap little Fox bodies and cheap little trucks and any type of little cheap chassis you can get. and then you stick a big ass LS in it, you put 2 Chinese hoo-hoos on it, you tune it to the moon, you throw it whatever fuel you can at it, and if it blows up, whatever, I'll go get another one. When your motor was $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, you couldn't do that. When you had to get parts from Japan, things weren't readily available, you had to get good stuff, we couldn't do that. We had a little bit more pride in our builds. Not saying that there's people out there that don't have pride in their builds, or that don't have pride in their LS builds, their Fox body Mustangs. There's plenty of those guys out there. I'm not making that generalization for everybody, but the core of my argument is sound. And I hope we all realize that. But, silver lining, we have the power to fix that. We can do this. We vote with our pockets, with our credit cards. We make this change happen. And we do it the same way we screwed it up. We buy good stuff. We buy made in the USA. We do our homework. We spend money on small American businesses that make good quality product. And we stop buying the cheap Chinese crap. Yeah, I get it. You want to go fast. You want to build a race car. I get it. It's expensive to go racing. It always has been, and it always will be. Racing was always a rich man's sport. Always. Now, whether or not you can afford it because it's a little bit cheaper now, or you cut some corners to do it now, it's still a rich man's game. I promise you it is. We can do this. We can change this, and I hope we do. Hey guys, this is not what this channel is really about, but it's something that has really been bugging me, and I wanted to put this out on video. Welcome to Automotive Adventures with Austin. This is my own little personal YouTube project that I'm trying to kind of share some of the stuff that I do and the things that I've built and drive and that kind of thing. I just want to say thank you guys so much. This channel is 14 days old at this point in time. I never imagined it would grow as fast as it did and how well it's done. This has been amazing, and I really, truly do appreciate you guys. I don't know where this project is going to end up. I don't know what this channel is going to end up becoming, but I'm super motivated and very, very excited to see what's ahead for me and what's going to happen with this channel. And I greatly appreciate all of you guys who have subscribed to me and who have spent time watching what I do. So thanks very much. I've got a bunch of work to do today, stops to make, running around to do. Hot rod life for me. I'll see you guys later. Take care.